In this video, I'm going to run you through the process of creating a model with this, where you have an external and internal offset surface and the blend surface in between. And it will also actually introduce you to the concept of quick sculpting, or quickly, dirtily laying out your design proportion-wise. And then in the second step, actually making sure everything is perfect. So let's get started. I'm going to create myself a new layer. I call this one Profiles. And for example, set this one to orthographic. I go to the CV curve, degree 2. No, I go with 3. Okay. And then maybe Alt click and a side view. There's my vessel. Then actually I can go ahead and maybe change those a little bit. Sculpt this one out a little bit more. Currently I'm in 10 millimeters, so I can use the grid kind of like as a reference. And maybe this one for convenience and snapping to the grid. Perfect. And then I have to reset my pivot point, for example here, and then I can actually do a revolve. There, Z and local axes. Let's take a look. There's the part. Maybe I should sculpt actually the shapes a little bit more. This, for example, if you see, is maybe a little bit higher. So let's stretch this one out. This one maybe, for example, is inwards a little bit more. There. And this one maybe we move up a little bit as well to there. This one is actually a sharp corner. I simply decide to up here have a nicer transition. If, for example, you don't want that, well then just change the degree to degree 2. You see, that's really nice. Changing the degrees, simplifying the shape, and then just then resculpting. At this point, actually, I would like to introduce you also to the idea that once, for example, you have a curve like this one, and you change it to a higher degree, you see it redraws the same curve, and you get more curvature points. So, for example, the lower part is the same. If, for example, I do it this way, and then I could, for example, click on this curve, move, maybe snap it. So you see now I changed just upper part, and because I changed the degree afterwards, this curvature remains exactly the same. But actually, let's go back to maybe this one. Okay. Now, this is actually maybe okay for the moment. Let's take a look at the top. So to quickly get an idea how this one might look like, and I control click on this path, go up, go to the side, go to the side, and always snapped to the grid. Well, maybe degree 4, single span, accept. Just have to rearrange some of those points. So I just made a really rough mock-up of a cap. I have to set the pivot point here as well. There, revolve, spacebar, check the surface, and maybe to get some ideas I could sculpt this a little bit more. See, I'm tightening the corner, I'm stretching, flattening those lines. For example, here now, if we go to 4, 5, 6, 2 more points, just to show you, because I have more points added, this line actually now remains straighter. And just pull these points really closely. So I'm actually sculpting by hand my transition. There. Just undo it. And I just thought this might be good to see. Let's go to 4. Well, everything is wonky and just have to rearrange them, which is pretty easy when you use the snap. There. Okay. Good. So this is kind of like our base surface. Let's take maybe a look at this arc. I could probably easily sculpt this out of 2 degrees surface, curve. Here I'm just moving my surface to there. Let's go to wireframe mode. And I hope I don't really see that edge, so I go back degree 2. And maybe click, click, and click. Let's compare. Actually, maybe degree 3. Maybe, yeah, this seems to get closer to kind of like that arc. Okay, so that's, for example, now the side arc. Now let's take a look at actually how we can quickly get a study, quickly a model for the internal surface. Now you see that the bottom part, this offset surface and the original surface, seem to have the same position. So probably this is one surface and the internal surface is the same curve, but then to the top it changes. So what we can do is actually take this curve, copy and paste, and then right mouse button, I should be able to deselect those CVs. CV5, here nothing, okay, there. This is 5, so that's the last curve I created. And move it in. So there you see like how those curves start and blend. And because I only have 3 control vertices, the change happens quite quickly, but also nice and evenly. So maybe I push it back to something like this. Okay, so that's my profile for my offset. So I do the same, revolve. See, because I copy and pasted, the pivot point was the same. There is my surface, nothing, object, and move this one onto the surface layer. So there's, how they're intersecting. This one actually, I might put onto a double layer, so I don't have to see it or hide it all the time. Let's go back to here, and in the next step, let's take a look at the curves that, for example, create those trims. So let's go back to here, and you can pay attention to, for example, the distance, and it looks like it is nearly an offset curve, but also down here the distance gets a little bit smaller. So there are 2 ways how we can do this. I can make an offset. This way, for example, I get an even offset. Maybe let's do this. Spacebar. And then in the secondary step, I select this point and, for example, move it down. This is going to break the construction history, which is fine. There. And maybe this one, I kind of like along this line, move a little bit. There. There you see how this progressively gets closer or bigger. Great. So this actually means that we now are nearly ready to do some of our trimmings. So I'm going to save. And let's go to project and curves on surface, view. I can actually simply select Y because you see I'm projecting along the Y axis. So I can, for example, click my bottle, spacebar, this line, spacebar. I can click this bottle, spacebar, this line, spacebar. So you know there are my curves on the surface. And again, very important, the curves to project and then letter cut have to run from over edge to over an edge. And then we can actually go to trim. Let's take a look what setting I have. Trim, okay. Click and click and say discard. Click and click, keep. So now there you see I have those two open segments. Also, you notice actually that I drew this profile and where trimmed over an area of the surface where I do not, like here, have a green line which represents a surface edge. Again, think about this as a sheet of paper. It starts and is being bent around this way. You don't want to trim over this edge if possible. So then, for example, to be quick, we can make maybe a simple skin. And this should work. Click and click. There. And you see there are a lot of lines. Those are spans. Currently you see this has 95 spans. So just as a warning, this is for prototyping, okay? But it might be a little bit complex or dense. So this is, for example, how we make a very simple linear blend. And then we could round those edges either with the surface blend or the round tool if you want to for quick access. The problem with this approach, as you see, this is actually very straight. And maybe you would like more something soft. So instead of using this approach, I'm going to use the surface blend. So click and click. And it might take a moment. And yeah, max span, because we are way over the spans we should use. We are over 100. So this is, again, okay for prototyping. Not necessarily really good for production. But the thing is, making production models is very time consuming. And for prototyping, maybe you can get away with less precision. So you basically pick the approach which is best for your purpose. But you see, I turned on my curvature graph and these lines somewhat flow. So this is not too bad. We could maybe clean up this blend a notch by maybe setting this to G2. And another G2 up here. You see now the zebra lines flow a little bit better. Okay. So that's the way how it looks. Okay, so now we could, for example, fill the bottom area, spacebar. So let's take a look how this looks, and maybe in this case let's take a look at the round tool, and I'm going to adjust this radius to something like this. The round tool is a nice and quick function, but it's not really the best result in terms of surface blending you get. But again, for something like this, for maybe some quick prototyping, really sufficient. Because otherwise, you rather want to build everything out of individual surface fillets, which will later look better, but requires a little bit more refining. It's also a little bit more complicated. So there's actually now our surface. Let's take a look. And what did I do? How did this one get moved? Okay, build. Now this is interesting. Let me do this again. Round. There, 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 and there. Spacebar. Okay, I must have accidentally somehow moved the part. You also see that here the round tool, for example, shows a lot of spans. Let's turn on this one. And there, for example, you can see that the zebra lines line up a little bit, but they change the direction pretty quickly. So it's only G1 tangent. But for example, if we put this one onto the MakerBot, you won't really see the difference anyway, because the printer doesn't have a good resolution to really show that. Then show the cap. Let's take a look at here. And there we are. So you see, this actually looks pretty good. This is quite close. If, for example, we would like to adjust some settings, maybe have a smaller rim here, then maybe we could go to Query Edit, select this one, go to here, slide 1. Slide 1, I have to lower the value. And you notice that actually I have to wait a lot for Alias to do those calculations. So if this, for example, bothers you, turn off the auto update and then later turn it back on. To tab. Okay. There you see, for example, that this is a bigger transition, a smaller transition. Let's take a look. Yeah. Okay. So that's, for example, how we make this in the process of a quick prototype. Let's take a look at how we can actually rebuild the rather complex surface we had before with a better surface. So first I'm going to project curve on surface, this curve. And before I do this, I would like you to pay attention to it. We have 1, 2, 3, 4. It's a degree 3 curve. Spacebar. And take a look at how many points are on that curve on the surface. Now the problem is this is a very simple curve, but if you bend it along 3D space and it has to perfectly sit on the surface, you need more math, more geometry, more control points. And let's select this surface and this curve. Great. Okay, let's hide those for a moment. Invisible. And now, previously we simply trimmed and then we put a blend in. This time we're not going to do this. We're actually going to go to the freeform blend and say edge to edge. And you see we have 16 spans. P actually, at this point I would like you to turn those on. That tells you in terms of continuity the G0, so position, PP, they're all green, which means the surface is good. This blend surface really matches the edge on the surface. Now, we could, for example, go to something nicer and say G2 and G2. And we have like 16 surfaces. You see, there's already kind of like this max span problem is not coming up. But this is still a pretty dense surface. We have 16 spans. I don't really want that necessarily to happen. So what we can do, see, this one doesn't really change much. For example, now we see like 91. Crazy, way too much. So let's go to multiple surface. Oh, great. Hold on. Let's go back. So I decided to make a single surface. You see this one is yellow. So it's position. It's not curvature anymore. So this is not really good. What's happening here is, while this looks like a very simple arc, we don't have enough geometry to really make this lower end of the blend perfectly fit on the inside surface. So what you have to do to get really good surfaces is you have to break it apart into multiple surfaces. And if you click this Bezier surface, you will see now that actually we have 9 surfaces, all degree 5, single spans. See, there are no spans, and they're all nicely aligned, G2. So this is really good. Let's click next, nothing, an object, and go to the control panel and go check continuity. So for example, let's check this one. Position is fine, G1. Tangency is fine, G2. Continuity is fine. So this way also the Bezier surfaces, so the single patch surfaces along this curve on surface are perfectly G2 to the bottle surface, and to each other they're perfectly G2. So these are really nice surfaces. So we can delete the construction history. And I meant, sorry, the locators there. And I'm going to, for example, select everything. I'm going to delete construction history. I'm going to select those curves, delete. And now it's actually time to trim. And what we're going to do now is go to trim and turn this 3D trim on. I have it set to normal. And now we go to this surface, spacebar, and then I click, click, click. You see the green pluses, that means there are good connections. The red means it doesn't cut really through the surface. This is bad. So we have to continue selecting all those edges. Now you see this one rests on an edge of the bottle surface. Perfect, spacebar. Then I can click the surface, spacebar, and you see it actually got cut away. Let's do the same for the inside. So trim the surface, spacebar. Then I'm going to select all those edges. Click the surface, spacebar, keep it there. So you see this is a really nice and clean model. Let's turn on the curvature graph, accurate. I don't know, maybe can we go a tick lower? Might take a second. And I might have crashed alias. Let me pause for a moment. Oh no, here it's coming. Because I hear my computer working. Oh, there it is. Perfect. And note to myself, don't do this again because this slowed down alias a lot. So let's go back to 0, 1. But there you see if you rotate, we don't really see much of a problem. The transitions are really nice and smooth. So this is actually a really good quality surface. Now because everything was built as a half and I did the 180 revolve, that also meant, for example, if I select the surface and show you the control points, go to top, you will see that, for example, those points, they are perpendicular to the mirror axis. So that means if I turn symmetry on, we also have a perfectly symmetrical object. So we do not need to deal with implied tangency there, because the half arc I created for the revolve, or through the revolve basically, really is perfectly capable of being mirrored without producing any kind of like kinks or sharp edges. So maybe here, let's turn those back on. Okay, that basically is the step. Then how, for example, you can quickly maybe take a look at some preview models, preview designs, sculpt around. And then once you're done, maybe actually rebuild the design, but with cleaner, better controllable geometry. So this one, for example, we could give to an engineer to continue working on. Now to finish this model, for example, the top part, the cap we can keep, but actually our lower part here is still open. I would like to continue working with half a model. So we could, for example, Alt Control click and Alt Control click, draw in a line. And then actually what we will do is we go to planar curve, select those edges, spacebar, and for example create this cap surface. Now we go to surface fillet, and I'm going to set this one also to G2 because that's a nicer, more organic rounding. Click on this surface, then click on all those surfaces that, for example, will touch the cap surface. Can maybe adjust this rounding a little bit. Let's see what we get. Press spacebar and maybe let's make this one 20. So it's a bigger rounding. So let's take a look and you see that's a pretty good transition. So for example, also here, we could, for example, now turn on the Bezier surface, maybe check continuity to make sure that not everything we see looks good, but actually also really works good. Now here actually we got a lot of surfaces, but let's for the moment keep it like this, because even again, I hope this shows you that as simple as stuff maybe sometimes might look like, the math behind it to create all these surfaces is actually quite complicated. No, because this is actually a lower edge, the bottle will always stand on it. I decided simply to go back to G1. Probably will be sufficient. Maybe change the radius a little bit more. There. Actually, I continue having those two, so I guess it doesn't really make much of a difference. Oh, actually it does. So yeah, let's keep it at G1. Okay, so next. And what you see there, the T, etc., those are called locators. So I can delete the locators. And for example, you have locators here. So I could go and say, is this G2? Oh yes, it is. Is this one positional? Of course, because it's also G2. Now let's take a look down here. This is, for example, not G2. See, this is only G1. This is only G1. This is G1. This is G1. So those are green. Those are red. But you see in between, actually, it is G2. So let's delete the locators, because what I would like to do now is I'm going to select all those surfaces. I'm going to delete the construction history, because I assume this is all now done. For example, if I turn on the symmetry, I have the other part. If actually I would like to have real geometry, then we go to symmetry, create geometry. And interestingly, it didn't do it. So let's try this again. No, that was the way how it works. Layers. Oh, I did not have it clicked. So only because it's yellow and you're working it, you still can select the layer. Create geometry. There, and then symmetry goes turned off. And there it is. Now, what I actually would like to see is, what's this edge? It is positional. Is this edge tangent? It is. Is this edge G2? And it is positional, so we will not have any breaking highlights around those edges. So this is actually now a model that could be finished to be shelled, and then, for example, brought into Fusion, then we core it out, and, for example, 3D print it.